A brief case study. It begins with one of the hardest fought, and in the end, one of the more successful fights against delegitimizing Israel on campus. And it ends with a textbook example of how to take strength in support of Israel and turn it into squabbling. It takes place in Berkeley. Exactly 2 years ago, the university's student senate was embroiled in debate over a proposal to divest from American companies, and this is the language of the proposal, American companies materially and militarily supporting the Israeli government's occupation of the Palestinian territories, unquote, including General Electric and United Technologies for supplying the IDF with aircraft components and helicopters. The resolution was complicated and fascinating and perplexing and very long, as was the fight to defeat it. And I will spare you both, except to note that an extraordinary coalition came together and worked together to oppose the Berkeley boycott bill. Some of the organizations involved, the Anti-Defamation League, Chabad, the New Israel Fund, Stand With Us, the Jewish National Fund. And the coalition also included a newly founded group in its first activity on the Berkeley campus. It was the local branch of J Street U, the student arm of J Street. Now, why does any of this matter? First, because Berkeley is a fulcrum campus. What happens there can have pivotal consequences. What happens in Berkeley does not stay in Berkeley. What succeeds in Berkeley spreads and grows elsewhere. And the extremist who fails in Berkeley fails big. In retrospect, the fight against the Berkeley boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign proved to be something of a watershed in the BDS movement, which has struggled to find meaningful victories since BDS, the boycott movement. And it really has struggled to find meaningful victories and continues to. But the case of the Berkeley boycott fight is also worth a look for something that happened afterward. Last November, in fact, and it happened in a meeting of the Berkeley Jewish Student Union, an umbrella group founded in its own words to provide a forum for communication and to unify campus Jewish organizations. A worthy goal. J Street U applied for membership, and the Jewish Student Union, in a move spearheaded by an activist group called Tikva, or Tikva, depending on where you live, denied them membership. Members of Tikva went further, denouncing J Street U as anti-Israel. Yes, Tikva is a right-wing organization, and yes, J Street U has a left-wing orientation. But Zionism in this world, in this climate, cannot afford to shun activists who openly and explicitly love Israel. Zionism in the year 2012 can't afford to exclude an organization which, for example, invites Israeli Ambassador Baruch Bina to address its national conference, as J Street did a few weeks ago. Places like Berkeley matter. It was in Berkeley and other like-minded towns that a surprisingly large number of young people forged a lifelong commitment to work for the ideal of an Israel true to values of democracy and prophetic justice. It was in places like Berkeley, with its tradition of activism and freedom of expression, where they learned that there is no contradiction in being critical of Israel's failings while acknowledging its merits and its dangers and believing in its potential. And it was in places like Berkeley, with its tradition of coalition building, where they learned that Israel needs all the help and support it can get. What Israel does not need are decisions which cut that support. After the vote to reject the organization for membership in the Jewish Student Union, 4 members of J Street U wrote an op-ed for the Forward newspaper, and this is how it ends. We often ask ourselves, why are we fighting to be part of a community that doesn't want us? Some have stopped asking the question. This is still the 4 students. Some have stopped asking the question and have simply walked away. We refuse. We demand a place in this community. We are still here. You have to know that in a place like Berkeley, it takes guts for anyone, whatever their politics, to admit that they care about Israel. What remains unclear is why, when Jews in Berkeley boycott fellow supporters of Israel, they believe they are doing Israel or the Jewish people any good. In the shrinking and highly politicized tent that is called the American Jewish community, the problem is hardly confined to Berkeley. Every community, every organization, every individual has a choice. They can build bridges or burn them. They can foster communication or deter it. They can recognize who their friends are and work with them, or they can shun them to the direct detriment of Israel. For many people who have lived in Berkeley, and I am one, it was in part because they found a welcoming, open, questioning, courageous community of Jews there that they made a decision to come to Israel to live. Most, wherever they are now, are still actively working to make this a much better place. They're not going away, and neither are many, many young progressive diaspora Jews who are asking only to be free to love Israel, be true to their values, and be full members in the work to support and, yes, defend a Jewish state. Thank you.